Bipartisan talks over raising the debt ceiling have broken down. Two key Republicans quit the negotiations yesterday, saying they couldn't reach an agreement, while Democrats insist on raising tax revenue to reduce the budget deficit. David Stockman is one Republican who supports a tax increase. David was director of the Office of Management and Budget under President Reagan. He's on the phone from Greenwich, Connecticut. David, I know it's probably more fair to call you a lapsed Republican. Regarding Erik Cantor and Jon Kyl leaving these bipartisan deficit talks, is it reason to despair, or perhaps is this a healthy sign, a sign the Republicans will not let the debt ceiling be raised unless there are meaningful cuts in federal spending?
No, I think it's a very worrisome sign. Look, the whole Biden group exercise has been a gigantic farce from day one. When you cut through all the propaganda, what happened after 6 weeks is they've taken every single item off the table, which could stem the $1.5 trillion flow of red ink that we'll have coming in year after year as far as the eye can see. Both parties have taken Social Security off the table. That's $800 billion. The Democrats are absolutely opposed to any change in the safety net, food stamps, Medicaid, welfare. That's $600 billion. Neither party has any solution to our $800 billion war budget, which is an absurd level of spending, given the fact that even Panetta says there's only 50 al-Qaeda left in all of Afghanistan. And now the Republicans take taxes off the table, which I would suggest is preposterous, since it defies fourth-grade math. You know, we're spending 25% of GDP, the highest in history, and the Republicans have no stomach whatsoever to take on the big items of spending, defense and entitlements.
David?
Revenue is at 15% of GDP, the lowest since 1948. So I say Erik Cantor should be sat on a dunce chair and told to keep his Pinocchio nose in the corner for the rest of his term. He's lying. There's no way that this problem can be addressed without both spending cuts, real ones, and major revenue increases.
David, we might be mixing a couple of nursery rhymes there. Let me ask you this question. The Republicans, whether it's Erik Cantor, whether it's Jon Kyl, there are many others, say now is not the time to raise tax revenue. Perhaps that's an option for the future because the economy is simply too weak. Do they have a point?
No, they don't, because unfortunately we've been building the debt for 30 years. We're now at the end of our balance sheet. We're out of balance sheet. We've passed the tipping point. And so therefore we have to address the flow of red ink right now, this month, next quarter, next year. And if doing so, either through spending cuts or tax increases, further slows down the economy, that's unavoidable. When you're close to bankrupt, and that's where we are as a nation, you don't have the option of saying, let's wait for 5 years and see if the economy gets any better.
So, David, if you were in that room, if you were at that negotiating table, would you have sat up and walked away? Is that the right tactic at the moment?
No, that was the wrong tactic. The right tactic would be to put everything on the table and bargain. I understand the Republicans ought to be fighting for minimizing the tax increase part of the package and pushing the Democrats to more real spending cuts, not this flim-flam that Biden is constantly talking about. But they ought to be at the table bargaining over real measures and trying to get a mix of revenue increases and real spending entitlement reforms that is as favorable as possible. But they're not doing that. They're walking away saying that half the whole equation is off the table, the word can't be uttered, can't even be discussed. When they take taxes off the table, they're putting default on the table because there is no possible way out of this massive fiscal hole we're in without tax increase.
David, are you perhaps secretly hopeful that Moody's will follow through on its threat, and if there is no deal on the debt ceiling by the middle of next month, they will put America's AAA credit rating under review? They won't downgrade it, but they'll put it under review for downgrade. Would that be enough of a message to Congress for these guys to get their act together and do something?
Well, it would be a helpful start. Moody's could never figure out subprime and woke up after the whole collapse had already pretty much been completed. The same thing is true here. We are in de facto default. If you look at $1 trillion plus a year for the next 10 years of red ink based on where the parties are today. That's going to put our debt well over 100% of GDP within a year or two. So effectively, the United States is in default, and the sooner that Moody's or S&P or the other rating agencies recognize it and say it out loud, the better off we'll be. There's going to have to be some kind of wake-up call here, and otherwise we're going to end up with what I call the mother of all bond market conflagrations, because that's exactly where we're headed.
David, it is a scary future indeed. We are grateful for your joining us. David Stockman, former director of the U.S. Office of Management and Budget under Ronald Reagan, talking to us about the deficit. And he has some harsh words for the Republicans. You just heard him there saying to Erik Cantor that he belongs in a dunce chair because taking taxes off the table is putting default on the table.